Welcome new and returning explorers to another edition of Zoo Tours. For today's episode, we are finally going back to the Minnesota Zoo to explore their Minnesota Trail, an exhibit that will take us through dense forests, past and under flowing streams, and up close to some of the state's most iconic wildlife, some that we haven't seen in years. Others I honestly didn't expect to see at all because I thought they'd be sleeping, and others as a tour group we have never seen before. So, now that you're all caught up, grab your gear and let's go see how our friends in the Minnesota wilds are doing. As we saw in my Minnesota Zoo breakdown video, the Tropics Trail, their Aquarium Discovery Bay, and the Minnesota Trail are all technically under one roof. So the exit to the Tropics Trail is also your gateway to the Minnesota wilderness. As much as I enjoy a constant 78 degrees and humidity, this is my kind of scene. We are now in the Merritt's Family Lodge. It has everything you could ever want in a cabin. Giant fishing gear, an awesome skunk figurine, a birch canoe on a wall, stone fireplace, and our first friends from the wilderness. We'll see creatures that are far bigger than even us, but the zoo also wanted you to appreciate the little things out there. Like 9 species of turtles in a see-through turtle tank. There's leopard frogs, and you can see the difference between an American bullfrog and an American toad. But my favorite is definitely the Mudpuppies. They're fully aquatic salamanders, known for their external gills and ability to regenerate body parts. Alright, moving on. We call this recreation of a back porch the human-altered habitat. When we build houses and roads, some animals vanish from the area, while some become part of the neighborhood, like Virginia opossums. Opossum, not possum, which is a completely different species. This is the only marsupial in the United States. Just in case you don't know what that means, marsupials carry and nurse their young in a little pouch like kangaroos and koalas. I know you've all heard of the term playing possum. In other words, they'll play dead to avoid being eaten. But they don't mean to be dramatic. It's actually more like involuntarily slipping into a stress-induced snooze from tonic immobility. Their whole body will turn rigid, their eyes will stare blankly, tongues might stick out with a little drool, and will emit the foul odor of a rotting animal, making predators say, yeah, this probably isn't worth it. As for their Minnesota status, they came to the state in the early 1900s and have been spreading northward ever since. As for their Minnesota Zoo status, this isn't their main territory as far as I know. It actually really belongs to raccoons. Going back on track with the exhibit's theme, raccoons are primarily foragers of fruits, nuts, and shellfish. But they're also opportunistic scavengers and take full advantage of our scraps. Where there's people, there's an easy meal for them. As we learned the last time that we saw raccoons, they have very sensitive hands, which helps them open lids, doors, and latches to get to hard-to-reach food. Since they're mostly active at night, they can avoid us even in busy cities. And they're not just surviving next to us, but they are thriving, especially around here. The state's Department of Natural Resources estimates there could be as many as 1 million raccoons in Minnesota. Alright everyone, get your allergy pills and inhalers out because we are going outside. What you're about to witness is the most impressive sight on the trail in my opinion. It's the only one that's open-fronted, and it's home to the American beaver. A remarkable rodent with a better understanding of engineering than most of us probably do. And they don't even need blueprints. Using powerful, ever-growing teeth, beavers gnaw through trees and gather branches to build dams to block streams and create ponds. And this perfectly reflects how they live in the wild, even if there are a few leaks. So why do they do this? Well, somewhere in that pond, they'll build a cozy lodge made of sticks and mud, with custom underwater entrances. They use these to store food, and it's the best way to keep out predators. When I know that a zoo has beavers, from experience, I just assume I'm not gonna see them. Maybe their presence had to do with the constant running of water that they so instinctively despise, or maybe it was because I came over here just in time for their keeper encounter, which was around 2:45. If you don't see them, the zoo does provide a live feed of their lodge. And I guess we'll have to get maintenance on that. Oh wait, here you go. Behold, beavers in their den. And if that's not an option, well, you can stick your hand in the wall and still see a version of a beaver who I call Chuck. They don't just build dams for themselves. Well, maybe they do. But at the same time, they build ecosystems for fish, frogs, birds, and insects. The area and signs right across from them that I think would make a great spot for a terrarium mention how important wetlands are and gives a warning about an invasive plant that harms them. And now, one last thing about beavers. Come over here to the end of the bend, and this display case called Agents of Change shows how people impact animals and how animals impact us, including the beaver fur trade that affected economics, culture, and even caused wars between nations. And on that lovely note, this path is about to take us under the surface of lakes and streams. As you can tell from the fish, water lilies, and boat right above us. No scuba certification required. By the way, have you ever eaten mussels before? You can learn all about them right here. Maybe even too much to the point that you might never want to try or eat them again. You know how Minnesota is called the land of 10,000 lakes? Well, I've always thought that phrase to be a little fishy. Actually, some say it has almost 12,000, while others say it has over 14,000 lakes. Regardless, they are home to 123 different fishes. 12 are signed in this wonderful display. You got walleye, bass, bowfin, and lake sturgeons that have been around for 150 million years. They can also live to be over 100 years and average 4 to 6 feet and 80 to 100 pounds, making them the largest fish in Minnesota. You're about to see like one of 1,000 reasons why this trail is my favorite part of the zoo. From here on out, there will always be an animal on your right and a different one on your left. Here we are looking for river otters. I wouldn't exactly call 3 to 4 feet long, including the tail, big. But this is Minnesota's largest meat-eating water animal. Well, I guess if you think about it, what else would it be? Otters are amazing swimmers. They move better underwater than most fish, can hold their breath for 8 minutes, and dive over 60 feet deep. Even in murky water, their whiskers help them find food and avoid obstacles. In the early 1900s, otters in Minnesota lost much of their habitat due to wetland drainage and pollution. Fast forward to today, they are common across the northern part of the state, and thanks to wetland restoration, they're making a comeback in the southern part of the state as well. We've seen animals that fall under the cute and cuddly category. Next, we have one that's cute, but not so cuddly. North American porcupines are thriving in Minnesota, so much so that the state doesn't even protect them. That might sound bad when you put it that way, but they don't actually really need it because, as you can see, their fur isn't really worth much. So hunters don't really bother them for the most part. It probably has to do with the 30,000 long sharp quills covering their bodies. Even babies or porky pets are born with a complete set. I think we all know what the quills are for, but bobcats, wolves, and coyotes have figured out how to hunt them without getting hurt. All you have to do is flip them on their back. But the porcupine's true enemy is the fisher, a fast, tree-climbing, clearly, member of the weasel family. An opportunistic predator, but contrary to the name tag, fishers rarely eat fish. Early European settlers said that it looked similar to a European polecat, which they called these Dutch and French words that are similar to fisher, and the name just stuck. According to zoo locals, this particular fisher is not an easy find because they're just so elusive, and they alternate this space with an American marten, a relatively new addition to the zoo family. Not sure if this is the same individual, but the zoo took in a 6-month-old named Marty McFly, found and rescued as a baby in 2023. The American, or pine marten, is another small predator that also belongs to the weasel family. Although they stick to eating smaller animals like mice, chipmunks, insects, and will dabble into fruits and nuts. That, though, I have no idea what that is. Back in the 1950s, due to overlogging, They were almost exterminated from Minnesota. Over time, more and more started to show up, and by the mid-80s, the population was big enough to allow Minnesotans to have a fur trapping season. Speaking of animals that learn to deal with humans, no one does it better than the coyote. You know, in this case, sometimes when an animal can survive near us, we don't always get along and we will label those animals as pests. Coyotes will damage crops, prey on our livestock, and sometimes crossbreed with domestic dogs. So in response, hundreds of thousands are killed every year across the country. However, they are smart, adaptable, and resilient. They can live just about anywhere and stay hidden until nighttime. Plus, many believe their litter sizes can adjust based on how many coyotes are in the area. They have big litters when their numbers are low, and smaller litters when their population is dense. Forget mentioning how they thrive in Minnesota. Coyotes are the most abundant predator in all of North America, covering a large territory in Canada, nearly all of Mexico, and 49 states. Their home at the zoo provides a clear view of the dogs really no matter where they are. But if you follow me around the corner, the coyotes do have a den area. It was designed so that if they rest by this window, they can also safely watch gray wolves from across the shelter. The two species have a similar history with us. Both were and are severely hunted, but one dog is found all over the continent, and the other only covers 10% of their historic range in the US. To keep it short, it really just goes to show how adaptable coyotes are. Generally speaking, wolves do require more territory and larger food. And also a big one is they rely more heavily on the structure of their pack for survival, while coyotes are a little more independent. They call this rescued pack the Funny River Five. They were found by firefighters in 2014, orphaned and dehydrated in an abandoned den after the Funny River wildfire in Alaska, which means, and I was told, that they are more specifically northwestern timber wolves. The best way I can describe their exhibit is that it's truly humbling. Views like this speak for themselves. One of the many viewing shelters even branches off the main path and was built deeper into the enclosure, so the wolves can surround the cabin on 3 sides. And it's furnished with a wolf statue boasting all of their natural abilities. There's graphics about their prey, other North American wolves, seasonal pelts, and a soundboard, which I'm sad to say did not work. But I'm sure we could just use our imaginations or Google. I didn't have a whole lot of luck at this one. What was once a mixed aviary featuring woodpeckers, cardinals, and turkeys now signs a red fox and a great horned owl that you can find in the top corner. I can't confirm if they are truly mixed or they rotate because, well, I never found the fox. So maybe a local in the comments can help out. Which is a shame, I do love foxes. However, the thing is, we're just finally getting to the best parts. In the next 2 enclosures, you'll find ecstatic wolverines, virtually fearless, destructive, and it probably has the best fierce to cute ratio of any animal. They're just one of those species that you'll either find snoozing in the corner or they'll have a severe case of the zoomies. There's rarely ever an in-between. Their scientific name means glutton, named after their voracious appetite. Wolverines live in huge, cold areas where food is hard to find. So when they come across something to eat, they devour as much as they can and will even keep coming back to a carcass until there is nothing left. They do get a lot of their food by scavenging, but are still powerful enough to bring down something as large as a full-grown deer. Oh, and they also make proficient climbers. This weasel relative lives in the northeastern regions of North America, Europe, and Asia. They were historically found in northern Minnesota, but hunted to the edge of extinction for their fur in the 1920s. I could say that about almost every animal on this trail, however, wolverines never got their comeback story. And according to the zoo, if you do find one in Minnesota, it's probably paying a visit from Canada. One big thing a lot of local American wildlife exhibits have in common, other than featuring local wildlife, pretty much all of them have bald eagles. And I don't think I need to specify anymore that this is in fact a rescue. And they make amazing ambassadors for their cousins in the wild. So as for bald eagles in Minnesota, officials counted 9,800 pairs as of summer 2024 and currently has one of the highest bald eagle populations in the United States. Along with wolves, eagles, owls, and more, the zoo also cares for rescued pumas. Sadly though, I didn't catch them very much on my first time around in 2021 and missed them entirely a few months ago. But if you go right now, you should see recently rescued cubs that just found their forever home right here. Now, when I mentioned animals that I didn't think would be awake for us to see them, I was really talking about half of the trail, honestly, but I really didn't think I would make eye contact with a Canada lynx. Looks like a bobcat, right? I actually heard a guest call them a bobcat, and I don't blame them. Overall, Canada lynx are slightly larger. They have longer ear tufts, their fur isn't as spotty, and the tip of the lynx's tail is black, while a bobcat's tail has a black tip and stripes. You see those large furry feet right there? Those double as snowshoes, and they have long legs to help keep their bodies above the snow. They're still not the fastest in the snow, but that's why they mainly rely on their stealth to catch prey. Minnesota once had the largest lynx population in the Great Lakes region, but nearly disappeared completely in the 80s, and only relatively are we starting to see some sort of recovery. It all really depends on where their food is. But the zoo does say that as the climate warms, it's possible that they will migrate north and out of the state for good. And ladies and gentlemen, before we head out and while you browse around our last gallery showcasing the black bear and bears in general that you need to pause to fully appreciate, I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to be your tour guide. Subscriptions, of course, are welcome, as are visits to my affiliates gift shop below in the comments. And as always, it's been a privilege teaching you about some of these amazing animals. And so that brings us to the final species that lives in the trail's newest exhibit, the American black bear, also rescues from Minnesota, where up to 18,000 individuals call home. Now, I just coincidentally had a friendly argument with a friend over this the other day. Do not be fooled by those brown tufts on their back. These are not grizzly bears, nor are they part grizzly bear. They are in fact true black bears. They are just experiencing the natural process of color variation. For example, some black bears are completely brown. Some are blonde, blue, and even white. Sometimes these variations are permanent, but something tells me that this one has a classic case of leftover seasonal shedding, and part of their winter coat decided to stick around a little longer. The Minnesota Trail gives us visitors a wonderful opportunity to really appreciate animals that very well could be our neighbors. And that's why I love exhibits dedicated to local wildlife, because they not only showcase the rich biodiversity of your hometown, but I also think it's easier to emphasize and connect people to the idea of preserving these natural habitats for future generations to come. And that will wrap up this tour. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on this exhibit and what you would like to change. And the next time that you hear from me, we'll be staying right here in Minnesota and take a look at the zoo's own aquarium. So thank you all for watching, and until next time, stay tuned, stay wild, and go make a difference out there.